Hello, welcome to the Big Scuba Show.
I'm Kernagis. It's nice to see everybody here. So I am the Director of Scientific Research for DEEP. And so I'm developing out the internal and also external collaborative scientific opportunities for DEEP organization, which we'll talk about a little bit more in this podcast.
Once again.
Hello, welcome back to the Big Scuba podcast. My name is Ian. With me on Zoom is my co-host.
Hello, my name is Gemma. Welcome to the Big Scuba podcast.
This is 180.
Episode 180.
Is that from?
Bullseye.
Bullseye or darts. As
Darts.
If you're wondering what she's on about, it's an 80s TV program that's involving darts, and they used to go 180.
Yeah, used to be quite a saying.
This isn't a darts podcast, by the way. This is a diving podcast.
Yes, we talk to people that are scuba divers or connected to the watery world. They might be filmmakers, astronauts, but some connection to the world of water.
And coming up on this episode, we're going to have a little chat about what we've been up to, but we have another guest for you. And this one is Dawn
Kernagis.
I
knew you were going to stumble over that.
I know.
Yeah, so Dawn is the Director of Scientific Research at DEEP. And we have recently spoken to Phil Short from DEEP, and we had a visit to DEEP, and then we've
we met Barry.
We met Barry, the Triton submarine pilot,
who claimed to fame is our most popular YouTube.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll put links to the YouTube playlist of our visit to DEEP, and there is also a podcast that recounts our tour of the two sites at DEEP.
But let me tell you, this episode is sponsored by our lovely friends at Narked at 90, who are beyond technical.
They are. So Narked at 90 can cover all your diving needs, whether you're a technical diver or a recreational diver. And they have recently teamed up with Ratio Computers.
Let me tell you all about Ratio Computers. So yes, as Gemma just said, they have just set this up with Ratio Computers. They don't just service only Ratio Computers. They will service just about every computer that there is out there, I'm pretty sure. So all the popular brands, you know the names. So Ratio Computers, these are built in Italy, and I've just recently done a unboxing, which is on YouTube. You'll find it on there if you search for it. This is the Ratio iX3M2 GPS Tech Plus.
Yes, it's an amazing bit of kit, isn't it?
It certainly is. There's a few. They all kind of same bit of kit, but they kind of slightly different, if that makes sense. So you can get a GPS version, or you can get a non-GPS version. There's the Deep, there's the Pro, and the Tech Plus.
Yeah.
Now the Tech, they're all basically the same thing. Like I said, some have GPS, some don't. But then with the app that you can download, you can then upgrade. So if you get something like the Deep or the Pro, and you think, hey, I want a bit more kit, I want a bit more options I can add on, bolt on, you can, because they're totally upgradable, and get the full bells and whistles, which is the Tech Plus, which is the one I've done the unboxing in.
Yeah.
So you've got I think that, they're rated to 220 meters. These are for serious dive computers for serious divers.
And they cater for various, was it 10 mixes of gas?
Yeah, they will link to 10 transmitters. So I in the video we talk about the gas analyzer, which I think is a real whizzy bit of kit. That plugs into the actual dive computer. So when say you're on say you're making a cylinder up with nitrox, and you want to know the blend, you attach the gas analyzer to the dive computer, do the test. So you don't need a separate analyzer for it. That pre-populates those figures into your dive computer.
Yeah, all part of the dive planning.
Cool.
Yeah. It's really good. So yeah, Ratio Computers, new brand
I
outlet.
should also say, because we've had comments on it, it's really quite whizzy that with the GPS version, you can log on the surface GPS 20 waypoints. So say you do a drift dive, or say you're going to do a dive and then you want to know where your boat is and blah, blah, blah. You can then use that dive computer to then guide you back to the boat.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Yes. Yeah. There is obviously these are the sort of technical part of the dive computers, and then they do a range of other dive computers like the watch style,
Yes.
not the block style. So, but have a look at narked90.com, go to the computers, dive computers section, and there you'll be able to see the Ratio computers.
You divers, you do like your kit, and we do. And they look a smart piece of kit.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
very good. So
very well made.
narked90.com.
Excellent. That is that. We might be at Stony. We're kind of looking to be in at Stony on Monday, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah.
We're recording this week commencing the 9th.
On a Thursday, yes. Yeah, so we're sort of planning that to get back in the water and take this dive computer for a wet dive.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good.
Yeah, so
do that. How's the old running going at the moment?
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, we did a run together on Sunday, didn't we?
Yeah.
So quite you pushed me.
Push you along a bit.
Yes. Yeah, so trying to get outside. The weather's improved a lot in the last week. So great opportunity to get outdoors, get running, and been doing a bit of swimming. And you've been crossfitting as well, haven't you? So so we just like to keep our dive fitness up and our general fitness. It's not just physical fitness, it's mental fitness as well. So really important, and getting outside and enjoying this great weather.
Murph is coming up, which is the big one. So
running,
look out for that. Yeah. Lots of running, lots of press ups, lots of squats, and lots of pull ups.
Yeah. So we've been posting some stories about our exercise routines. So yeah, if you've got any advice or say what you're doing, then let us know.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be good.
We've been speaking, we've had a couple of podcast interviews, haven't we? We've spoken to recently Byron Conroy, and he's based in Iceland. So we heard all about Iceland, which was amazing. And then we've just recently spoken to Sarah Donahue.
All mothers go to Iceland, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
That's the phrase, and all mothers go to Iceland.
Yeah, isn't it Pat the Pocket? No, that's another supermarket,
no,
isn't it?
Other supermarkets are available.
Anyway, getting all muddled. And then we've just spoken to Sarah Donahue, haven't we?
Yeah.
And she's actually a powerboat racer, but she's very into her stunts, underwater diving. She's a HSE media diver as well. So that was really interesting, and listening to her talk about
she's
conservation.
Into fitness as well, isn't she?
Yeah, very much so. So that's all coming up in the next few episodes.
Yeah, that'd be good. So should we get Dawn on?
Yes, yeah. So this is our podcast with Dawn Kernagis, and she's telling us about her journey, really. And now she's actually at Deep. So
make sure you're following Deep.
Yes, yeah. So look at their Instagram page and have a look at their website. Really, really interesting about what the future holds for ocean exploration.
Yeah, it is exciting stuff.
Yeah. So this is episode 180, Dawn Kernagis. Welcome to the Big Scuba podcast.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
I think we've been following you probably right from the very beginning when we started the podcast on our social media channels, and watching everything that you get up to.
Well, I've been following you as well, and your running exploits, by the way. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun to follow.
Yeah, great.
So tell us about diving. What got you started, and what does diving and being underwater mean to you, Dawn?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. So being underwater is just this place of comfort, and I don't say solitude because I'm with a team, but it's just this feeling of kind of escaping to a different world that I just feel incredibly comfortable in, and just being part of this other world it definitely gives you perspective on life. I just went diving last week, and you know, every time I have the chance to drop underwater, it just shifts your perspective, you know, from
Yeah.
the hustle and bustle on land and all the things, all of your worries on land, everything kind of shifts over when you're underwater and you're just focusing on the dive and focusing on the environment. It's pretty cool. So going back to your first question, I got into diving because when I was 8 years old, I went to the ocean. It was my first time to the ocean. So I'd actually gone to the Pacific Ocean when I was about 4 years old. And I actually have this really cool picture that my mom took of me and my dad staring out over the Pacific Ocean, and he's holding my hand, and you know, I'm just looking in awe at the ocean, and I know my dad was too. And when I was 8, we moved from landlocked Iowa in the United States to the coast, or to North Carolina. So we went down to the coast of North Carolina pretty quickly after we moved. And I was always a water bug, lakes, ponds, you know, wherever I could swim, I would swim. And so I got into the ocean, and, you know, my parents had to essentially say, okay, you have to get out of the water now. You know, we have to go home. But during that trip to the coast, we went to an aquarium. So the North Carolina Fisher Museum and Aquarium down at the coast. And I was looking at the fish and just reading, taking everything in. I was already a geek in the sense that I just studied everything. And like, I would go to a museum and read everything I could. And I was collecting rocks, and I thought I wanted to be a geologist or a paleontologist, getting interested in fossils. And then I saw these fish, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a marine biologist. And so that Christmas, I asked my parents for the Jacques Cousteau books. So Ocean
Excellent.
World, and then Dolphins and Whales, or Whales and Dolphins. And so I've actually lent them off to a friend of mine. I was going to take a peek to see what the titles were again, but I've lent them to a friend of mine whose daughter wanted to read them. And so I got for Christmas, and I carried those books everywhere with me and read them cover to cover over and over again, and actually carried them in my backpack. So saying that, I think I was training for technical diving, if you've ever seen the size of those coffee table books
Wow.
by Jacques Cousteau. So anyway, so I just fell in love, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to learn how to scuba dive. I want to, you know, just spend as much time in the ocean as I can. So long story short, because I was so young at the time, it looked like the next time I could actually learn how to scuba dive was going to be 15, because neither of my parents had the time to be able to take a scuba class with me. Even though they wanted to, they just didn't have the time. They worked 2 jobs and everything else. So that was my 15th birthday present, and then it just went on from there.
Nice.
Wow, really nice. Did your parents dive?
No, nobody. My parents did not dive. My dad did some free diving when he was stationed on Midway Island with the Marine Corps back in the day. So I would hear stories from him about that, and it just sounded amazing. My sister is scuba certified. My younger sister is scuba certified, and actually my oldest sister is also scuba certified now. So yeah, so I have a
Oh,
little bit of
brilliant.
diving in the family. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then from age 15, did you just work your way through the certifications?
Yeah, so I got certified, and they essentially couldn't get me out of the dive shop, so I just hung around the dive shop and worked. And I say that in the sense that I couldn't get paid necessarily, so I worked for air fills and nitrox fills and dive trips. And so yeah, so I started to work my way through slowly but surely, and I had some amazing mentors and instructors. John Renfro was my open water slash I think open water 2 slash advanced and master diver, nitrox, kind of all the early certifications that I went through, and he was just fantastic to train with. And then I went on my first trip to the Florida to the Florida Springs when I was 16 years old. My dad and my sister came down with me, and that was the first time that I saw a cavern. So we went to Ginny Springs and went to the
Wow.
cavern there, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I talked to my parents, and I said, can I go through and take a class? So I ended up, they let me take a class when I was in high school and get started in my cave diver training as a high school student, and then ended up just, you know, continuing my training from there on with
Wow.
folks like Jared Jablonski and some other folks as things grew out.
Wow.
So yeah, it was totally in your heart then.
Yeah. I mean, so I think one of my nicknames in high school was Don Cousteau. So yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We've had a few previous guests come from North Carolina, because you've got a lot of wrecks off that coast.
Yep.
Which is the graveyard, isn't it? What's referred to. Have you done any wrecks yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
Graveyard of the Atlantic, there's just amazing wreck diving off the coast of North Carolina. And that was definitely some of my earlier diving. And then I've really gotten back into it since I moved back to North Carolina in the last few years,
Yeah.
since the pandemic kind of passed. So yeah, that was some of my early diving and just incredible experiences offshore. I actually had one really cool wreck diving. One of my most memorable dives. We were out. We had done a deeper wreck dive, so about 130 feet or so, and then we were coming back into the second dive into a shallower wreck. And dolphins. We had a pod of dolphins. They were playing in the wake of the boat. That happens, right? So they're playing around, and then typically you cut off the engine, drop the anchor, and they disappear. And they did. But as we're getting in the water, we had a little bit longer of a dive, so we're like, we'll just wait for everybody else to get in the water before we get in. And as everybody else is getting in the water, the dolphins came back after everybody else dropped. And so we're like, we just put on our mask and fins and just swam around the surface with dolphins out in the wild for like an hour. It was amazing. It was such a cool experience.
And they just hung around.
They just hung around, and actually more came over time. It's almost like they're calling out to the rest of the pod saying, hey, come check these guys out, these crazy humans out.
That's amazing. That cool. Yeah, great experience. Yeah, and to be out in the middle of the ocean as well and experience it.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my most memorable experiences off the coast of North Carolina.
And then from there you started moving into turning diving actually into your job.
Yeah, so I started when I was 19. So I worked on a couple of smaller cave diving projects, cave exploration projects in the US, and then was invited to, I finished up my training with Jared Jablonski, and at the end, I had been doing a fair bit of cave diving, but I still had one class left to go. It was full cave at the time through NACD, National Association of Cave Diving. And so as I finished up my training, I asked him, would it be possible to come see what they were doing with WKPP, so Woodville Karst Plain Project, which was a deep underwater cave exploration project around the panhandle of Florida. And they were really pushing the edge with respect to diving physiology and equipment and procedures. And I was just really fascinated by the work that they were doing. And so he said, yeah, absolutely, come down. You started off back then, I think probably still to this day, carrying tanks, and just started doing kind of early surface support. And then you got to get in the water to do some in-water shallower dive support. And you just work your way up through the system as you get mentored along the way. So that was in 1996 that I joined them, and I continued to work with them. And this is all as a volunteer. So I was in college at the time, so I would drive down on my weekends to go do this, and worked with them through 2007. But about in the middle of that, they decided to spin off an organization called Global Underwater Explorers. And so I ended up joining them as the first operations manager for GUE. And so that was a really cool experience to be able to work with them in that context. And then we also used to be that Global Underwater Explorers and also Halcyon Equipment Manufacturing were in the same building as Extreme Exposure, the dive shop in Florida. So we all kind of played multiple roles in our jobs. And so I kind of worked with Halcyon there and also in South Florida, as well as doing my operations manager job with GUE. So I did that for several years before I ended up going back into research.
Yeah.
So through education, you dived, and then diving became your career path as well.
Yeah. And it wasn't intentional. All along the way, I was like, I want to do. It's kind of funny if I look back. I was like, I want to do hydrogeology. I want to do marine archaeology. Marine biology still sounds fun. I could do both. And then, it's just oceanography. Like I took so many classes at the university during all this time. This is like, late 90s, early 2000s. The university's like, get out. You cannot take any more classes. So I finally got out, and I said going back to research. So during this time, I was also working back home in a research lab at the university. So once I left GUE, I ended up coming back to North Carolina and worked back in the university setting as a research technician in a couple of labs.
Yeah. And as a research technician, was it all diving related? It wasn't.
Not at all. No.
Oh, wow.
No. So one was the marine biology lab that was we were looking at coral reef fish behavior and neuroendocrinology. So looking at how certain molecular signals in the fish affect their behavior and vice versa. So we were studying the bluehead wrasse. If anybody's familiar with that fish, it's a really cool fish. So the dominant male, and probably a lot of the listeners have seen it. So the dominant male has a bright blue head, an Oreo cookie stripe down the side, and then a bright yellow tail. And they, kind of own a site. That's their main site. And then you have subordinate males that are kind of a drab yellow, and then you have the females, which are a little bit more of a brighter yellow. And so the thing about the bluehead, the dominant male, is it's so bright and so colorful that it becomes kind of a target for predators. And so if that dominant male gets picked off the reef, dies in any way, then the largest fish, doesn't matter if it's male or female, becomes the dominant male. So if it's female, it takes about 7 to 10 days, and that fish actually transforms and starts creating sperm and doing all the dominant male behaviors. It's
and
fascinating.
Does it turn blue as well and
Turns
take on
blue.
the... Wow.
Yeah, and you can see the transition, like it's the colors are starting to change, and
Right.
it's just this automatic thing that happens, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a male that does that. It's
That's
really
amazing.
fascinating.
Yeah.
So that was cool to study. And then I ended up kind of moving into research full time, and then I got back into diving research, more on the medical side of things.
Yeah. And what are you doing on the medical side of things now?
Yeah. So, well, back then, just a quick kind of how I got from that work to doing what I'm doing now. So I, because of the WKPP, because of the divers and kind of watching them push themselves physiologically, I had a lot of questions about, are there things that we can be doing for our divers? There are like all these articles and forums online that said, oh, if you eat a bunch of blueberries, you get antioxidants and you'll be safer as a diver. And I was like, it doesn't seem right as a researcher. It seems like there's more to this story. So I had some questions, around looking at, is there a way to identify the decompression stress that a diver is experiencing? So not decompression sickness, but is there something in the body that changes that we can say, yes, the diver's experiencing stress at the physiological level that maybe we can kind of protect them against as divers? And there's still, to this day, there's really no marker for that, but that was kind of my question. And so I pitched out that idea. I remember I was super nervous when I pitched out the idea. I pitched it out to my mentor, one of my several mentors, Dr. Richard Moon, who's at Duke University. And I used to be one of his test subjects on a regular basis. So I was super nervous because he's brilliant. And I was super nervous pitching out this idea. He's going to be like, this is just, this isn't a good idea for these reasons or something like that. I wanted to make sure it was a good idea. I mean, I had all these notes and diagrams and everything when I went into the meeting with him. And he's like, oh, I think this is really interesting. He's like, we should study this, but we need funding to do that. I was like, okay, how do we get funding? So he said, well, you have to write a grant. And so I was like, okay. He said, this is an example of a grant that I've written that was successful. That got funded. And he's like, actually it's David Dulett. I'm sure if you guys know David Dulett, Navy Experimental Dive Unit. So David and I knew each other from WKPP. And he was like, hey, there's a deadline coming up for a funding opportunity. And so I decided to write my first grant, focused on this project idea, and it got funded, which I'm super thankful for. So Dr. Elizabeth Montcalm Smith with the Navy was the person who funded it, and she, I'm very thankful that she believed in me, because it was it's a very young novice individual in this space. But I also have Dr. Richard Moon as a mentor, which is a big piece of that. Yeah. So I got the funding, and then I was like, well, so I went back to the university. I said, well, I've got money. Can I come go to graduate school? And usually it's the other way around, right? And so they were like, wait, you got funding as a nobody, essentially. And so I said, yeah, I did. So I kind of laughed that Duke would have never taken me as a graduate student if I hadn't had funding, but because this is a pretty stringent criteria for them. But anyway, so they took me on, and I ended up doing my PhD at Duke, and then just continued my way. So as a PhD student, I did this project, but then I also worked on a number of other projects that are focused on diving medicine, space medicine, extreme environment medicine with the Hyperbaric Center at Duke, and then continued that as a postdoc, and then ended up building out a career where I worked at a place called Institute for Human and Machine Cognition. So we build out a research program that's focused on human performance and resilience in extreme environments. Yeah. And then I got brought back over to University of North Carolina. So that was my last university job before I transitioned to Deep, which just happened this past February.
Yeah. So extreme environments, so that's space, underwater, or where there's no resources.
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, yeah, any place where you have changes in environmental factors that influence the human physiology. So the big ones would be space, high altitude and subsea, but even things like the desert, where it's going to be more difficult to hydrate and you have high temperatures. So we do have other extreme environments that we study, but those first three are the big ones.
Today's episode is sponsored by Narked at 90, so let's find out a bit more about them. Narked at 90, their tagline has been beyond technical, which describes them pretty well. John Routley and Brent Hudson launched the company over 20 years ago. They are both technical divers who have logged thousands of mixed gas dives between them over a 30-year period. Using their engineering know-how and diving expertise, have developed bespoke, personal, commercial and military diving equipment and products of a universally recognised, unparalleled calibre.
Their ability to be adaptive and versatile with their developments led them to support the NHS during COVID. Using their superior knowledge of breathing and oxygen monitoring systems to help develop emergency ventilators. They also design and supply the sneaky stuff used by defence-based development groups throughout the Western world, although they can't tell us much about that. If you're thinking of moving across to tech diving or completely new to diving, Narked at 90 can advise and guide on the best equipment and setup for your personal or commercial requirements. Narked at 90 have unparalleled experience of sheer water dive computers and are the longest serving and sole and UK European service centre for those. They are happy to offer technical support, servicing, repairs and upgrades to all shearwater computers, past and present. Narked at 90 stock shearwater computers, but are also stockers and technical support centre for many other manufacturers, including Divesoft, JJCCR, Hollis, Revo and Kiss Rebreathers.
Based centrally in the UK, Narked at 90 also offer full rebreather head servicing for selected manufacturers.
Bespoke cable assemblies.
Advice on specific fitting requirements.
Suggestions and guidance for home builds.
Computer laser cutting and engraving.
Pressure testing to simulate 400-metre dives.
So, Narked at 90, a reputation built on supporting both manufacturers and divers worldwide.
Go to narkedat90.com and make sure you are following their social media to keep up to date with their latest news and offers. And there's a lot of evolving and I suppose new science coming out all the time, especially with the undersea and how it's linked to the future space exploration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a ton of research. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, so there are differences too between what happens to the human body undersea versus space. But there are some shared changes as well. So things like fluid shifts in the body, even though they're a little bit different between the two, but we see changes in where blood goes to and other fluids in the body shift to in those environments. And space, especially for when you're living in space, you have to think about things like elevated carbon dioxide in the environment that you're living in. Same thing for divers and even individuals who live and work in submarines. So that's definitely of interest, or habitats, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then, yes, again, if you're thinking about habitats or submarines in space, you're thinking about changes to circadian rhythm, potential sleep disruption, lack of vitamin D exposure. And then in space, you have some unique things like radiation exposure, for example, that you wouldn't have in diving. But in diving, you have other things like hyperoxia, for example, which is a consideration. And decompression sickness is a shared concern, especially for individuals in spaces when they either are doing a spacewalk or even potentially moving into a space vehicle where the pressure is lower. So essentially, they're decompressing as well. And so when they do that, either getting into the spacesuit or getting into the vehicle, there's a decompression procedure and they can get the bends. So there's a lot of shared knowledge across those two spaces as well.
Must be so interesting having that perspective of altitude and space, and then like deep sea environments as well.
This is what we kind of touched on with Joseph Dituri, wasn't it?
Dr. Deep Sea.
Yeah, Dr. Deep Sea.
Yeah.
Do you know him?
I do know him. I've known Joe since I was 17 years old. So as you guys know, the community is very small, so we all kind of know each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so interesting talking to him. Obviously he put himself in that habitat and lost some height as well. And it was just and not regained it back. It just shows even that, because it wasn't deep, and that extreme environment
The
has
time he spent, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100 days, wasn't it?
Yeah. Constantly under
It's 100
pressure.
days. No, and it's really, I mean, so, and just researchers tend to work across those two spaces, right? So if you have somebody who's doing research in undersea medicine, they're very often involved in space medicine as well, because of that shared knowledge and just learning from each other too, from those two different communities as well. So it's a lot of fun. And just kind of touching on that, in 2016, I had this really cool experience where I was able to combine that diving operational background and my research background, or kind of my research at that time, and I had the chance to do the NASA NEMO mission. So that was living in the Aquarius reef-based habitat. We were living at 15 meters. It was a 16-day mission, split out 2 back-to-back 8-day missions. But we lived with several NASA and astronauts, and also an ESA astronaut, Matthias Maurer, and just did so much research over the course of that mission. I think we had 25 research projects that we were involved in that kept us really busy, just like you would have on space station, right? So something like NEMO, they use those missions, those undersea missions, as a way to test out protocol, software, hardware, things that they're testing out to go before it leaves for space station, right? So as an example, we were testing out a device called the MinION device, which allows you to sequence DNA. And typically a DNA sequencer is like bigger than the desk I'm sitting at right now, or maybe half the size. And this thing fits in the palm of your hand and plugs into your phone, which is crazy. And so they were testing out the protocol for it before it was going up to space station. And astronaut Kate Rubins was actually the first person to sequence DNA in space.
Wow.
So we were the first people to sequence DNA undersea. I laugh that I don't think we had a lot of competition in that area, but it was cool because each person got to pick a place in the habitat to swab. And so I picked behind the trash can, which is pretty gross.
But why would you need to do that in space? Is that like for when you're doing rock samples and things like that?
Yeah, so essentially if you get a number of things, like if you find any kind of biological samples that you want to test out, but also if somebody were to get sick, for example, you can take a swab and you can actually identify what it is that they have, and you can guide treatment with that, just like they do in the clinical setting. So it's going to be really useful, especially for longer duration space flight. So it's pretty exciting to see that technology
Should we
now.
go to Mars and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, even the longer duration, some of the lunar missions that they're talking about, as they're building out a base on, lunar base, which is one of the goals downstream. We're looking at longer and longer duration missions. So that'll be really important.
I personally find the whole relationship in the science really quite interesting, of how diving and the effects of underwater can be used then to go the opposite way and go into space. I find that relationship really quite interesting, and especially as it's new
vice versa
as well.
Yeah, and vice versa. So it's really cool to see those shared lessons. There's actually a group that's putting together, and this has happened in the past, this isn't the first time, but they're putting together a sea to space medical symposium for more for practitioners than anything else, but that will be happening later this year in Houston, Texas. So I'm super excited, to be a part of that, and just to listen to some of the more lessons that are shared.
Yeah, and when we first started out in the podcast, we spoke to a NASA astronaut and somebody that worked in the underwater.
Weren't we?
Yeah. But now, realizing the connection between deep sea and space, it's just incredible.
Yeah, and also, so it's just talking about, if you think about at NASA Johnson Space Center and also at ESA in Cologne, Germany, they have the underwater training facilities there, right? So NASA is the Neutral Buoyancy Lab.
Yeah.
And, they have a full-scale mock-up of the space station, the International Space Station. And, astronauts go in a full suit, EVA suit, and they go and practice over and over and over again the maneuvers that they need to do for whatever their task is going to be when they're on the spacewalk. So it's almost muscle memory by the time that they get outside of the station. So even in that sense, talking to the astronauts when we were doing our NEMO mission, they said going out and doing excursions outside of the habitat. So we did, we had umbilicals and hard hats, and we were going out and doing working shifts for like up to 6 hours at Aquarius Reef Base during our NEMA mission. They said that was, more realistic than a lot of other kind of simulation or analog scenarios that are out there as far as what's realistic when it comes to space flight and space operations.
Yeah.
Is that because of the environment that things can change? Do they
Yep.
mean?
Exactly. It's the environment. Things can change. You have certain things that are going to be unpredictable.
Yeah.
Team communication. So they have the communication loop during NEMO. When you're out doing your spacewalk or ocean walk, so we call it EVA, right? Extravehicular activity. When you're outside doing those excursions, you're communicating back to the habitat, and then the habitat is communicating back to shore base. So similar to what you have when and then also there's kind of an open loop across everybody, but it's similar to the communication loops that you would have for space flight. And so even in that, they're testing out communication delay because you're off to Mars and you don't have that direct communication back to back to mission control, just as an example. So that's a really great place. And then just the psychological pressure of if every decision you make is life dependent, right? So your team and your crew and yourself, you're depending on you to make the right decisions and not put other people at risk.
Yeah, very interesting. And well, that kind of brings us on to Deep, Ben. How did that come about for you?
So I was, as I mentioned, so I ended up at University of North Carolina, my last academic job, and was vice chair for research for the Department of Neurosurgery there. And we had some great Department of Defense funded projects, and everything's moving along swimmingly, so to speak. And Kirk Kroc was in, and I know you all know Kirk. So Kirk was in San Diego for a meeting. And the funny thing is he had already tried to get me to connect with him and some folks from Deep back in the spring, but our schedules just didn't align. And so I was in San Diego for a STEM outreach project that I was involved with. He was in San Diego for Comic-Con, and he said, "Hey, we're all here. I'd really like for you to meet some folks." I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And I'd already kind of chatted with him a little bit. He didn't tell me exactly what was going on because it kind of couldn't, because Deep hadn't come out of stealth yet. And so I also know Phil Short really well. We go way back. And so same thing, like there's been these little drippings of information, but not enough to really feel. I kind of had an understanding.
You know someone else we know as well, Lee Bishop.
Oh yeah.
I was talking to him on Friday.
Yeah, Lee's fantastic. Yeah, it's funny. Again, the community is super small, so yeah, I love it because whenever I see updates about your podcast, it's like okay, like it's part, it's great. It's like one big happy family. So, showed up, met up with Kirk and some of the folks from Deep who I finally had a chance. So Sean Wolpert is our president, and he had just started as president at the time, and so they gave it to kind of pull aside a room. We all sat down. They showed me the slide deck. I think the second slide in, I'm asking questions. And I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. And I told Kirk, I was like, you've got a dream job. This is fantastic. And he said, well, why do you think we want to talk to you? He's like, and so essentially the conversation was think about how you'd like to be involved. And so I said, well, it's like I can consult. They're like, if you want to think bigger, you can think bigger than that. So I said, if I were to come join you guys, I would want a director of scientific research position. And they said, that's what we're thinking. So I ended up starting kind of consulting just lightly at the very end of last year and started full-time February 1st. And no regrets. It's been just I pinch myself every day. It's just an absolute dream job. So
amazing. Yeah.
It's an exciting place, isn't it? I remember when I was a bit like a rabbit caught in the headlamps when I walked in, and I kind of walked in and saw everything and saw the submarines, and you like got the buzz, and it's like, wow, this is awesome. What an amazing place.
For the potential of the future as well, looking at and hearing the enthusiasm of everybody that worked there was just amazing.
Yeah, it's contagious for sure. So they brought me over after these conversations. So they're like, why don't you come over? We'll bring you over. You can give a talk about your NEMA mission and your experience with the NEMA mission. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And I walked in and saw what you guys saw, right? Saw the workshop, saw the campus, and met the people. That's probably the biggest thing. And I was like, okay, I want to be here. It wasn't even a question. So it's just been absolutely incredible ever since. So
Yeah. So what does your role entail, what you can tell us at the moment?
Yeah. So as a startup, a couple of things. So one is developing out, so director of scientific research, so developing out the internal requirements and needs, I guess, the capabilities for research. So as we're doing research, just by the way, research isn't new for Deep. So there's been a lot of research that's already been done and is continuously ongoing for the work and for the development that we're doing with our habitats and our submersibles and everything else.
Yeah.
But essentially, as we're building out and doing more of that, developing that infrastructure that's required for data management, and if we want to do human testing, the ethics review, and all those things that are going to be required as we build out our internal research capabilities and requirements. But then also thinking about partnerships. So thinking about who can we collaborate with, who wants to collaborate with us, talking to our potential collaborative partners about what their needs and requirements would be with like our habitats or our submersibles, and then also talking to potential funding partners or sponsors. So there's a lot of conversations with different government entities and private foundations, and trying to identify who might be able or willing to fund collaborative research projects with us, and then
Yeah.
making sure as we move forward to partner them up with those potential collaborative say partners again, but partners in those spaces, so that we're all working together in one direction.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
suppose they might have needs as well if they're looking to come on as a partner and help fund some of
Yeah.
it. They'll have
Yeah.
needs that, what they want from the science.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of folks who are like, oh, we could do all this research with us. We got to find the funding, even if it's just to support, right now, if it's to support their salary. And it's like, so what I take as one of my responsibilities is identifying those funding opportunities and then putting them in
Yeah.
touch with the sponsors, or then working together on the proposal writing and getting all that moving forward. We just actually found out we just got our first grant funded.
Oh,
So
wow.
in collaboration with University of North Carolina, and so this is
Yeah.
Office of Naval Research on the U.S. side of things, and so they have a big STEM outreach program within the Office of Naval Research, and they really want to develop the undersea workforce. And so they're putting a fair amount of money into this work. So this project's a 3-year project for STEM outreach. Again, University of North Carolina leads it. We're a major partner with them. And then also DAN, so Divers Alert Network, is also working with us.
Oh, brilliant.
And that's Frauke Tillman is running things from their side. And then the lead from the UNC side is Virginia Papadopoulos. So I'm not sure if you've met her yet, but she's an incredible researcher. And you guys should definitely interview her if you get the chance. She's awesome. Yeah. So we're going to look at humans in the sea, how humans live and work undersea, and kind of go from breath hold to scuba to closed circuit to submersibles, ROVs, AUVs, habitats, and then what does the future look like? And it'll be an 8-part docu-series that will be kind of focused towards high school / university level students. And then we'll have some design challenges around those projects as well. So
you've got to get the schools involved. In fact, we did have somebody contact us actually, and I'll connect you two up. I should get you, just remind me about that. They when we went out with the YouTube videos, they made contact. They're an engineering school.
Okay.
And they were quite interested on whether you'd be looking to branch out to schools and universities. So I'll after this, I'll send you their details.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
And that's really important, because they're the people of the future as well, to kind of for them to embrace and maybe go into these fields as well as research, and because it is this exploration journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that mentorship piece of things is so critical. Probably every person you guys have on your podcast, we all have a series of mentors who have their mentors, right? And I think that's really important. And Deep, is definitely a multi-generational company. So we're just kind of creating the seeds right now with the work we're doing, but we see the work that we're doing is not going to happen just in our lifetime. We're going to need to be able to pass that on to future generations. So really supporting and developing that workforce is a really important piece of what we're doing.
Yeah. But research shouldn't cost the earth, should it? So what I quite liked when we was there, Phil mentioned that written into the business model of Deep is that it will never be used for oil or gas exploration, which is, there is, that's a lot of money that companies do put into that. But it's good that Deep has said, no, not for us, and it won't be used for that. because you don't want to do that and see like the seabed get used more for that.
Yeah, like deep sea mining is another
Yeah.
line that we won't cross. But where we have talked about where our habitats or systems could be useful, as an example, is observatories, right? So
Yeah.
like putting people in place so they can make sure that there isn't over extraction and that people are not passing their or exceeding their quota and what they're allowed to do, whether that's oil and gas or deep sea mining or whatever that might look like, and also just being able to monitor the local environment and make sure there's no significant damage being done, because otherwise you wouldn't know if you're not actually observing that. So
yeah. And I think that's what came across from our visit. It's like just scratching the surface, and then you think about it and you just realize the potential and the size of what this can become, and all the different aspects, and everything is and the partnerships that you can make around the world as well.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So, as I've been developing out the science program, and then based off of kind of the last few months of conversations, except we've had a pretty hectic road tour going on where we've been just meeting with all kinds of universities, research programs, research agencies. We've kind of looking at 3 different silos of research. So one is on the human, right? So we're looking at putting humans under sea and saturation. That's not a new thing, but we're looking to expand that population, expand accessibility. So, in the past, saturation diving research was largely focused on individuals in commercial or military diving, and that's had tended to be a kind of a distinct, population as far as gender goes, and then also just physical makeup and everything else in health. So that's definitely something we want to expand on. And then also tapping into now with the capabilities that we have and the technology that we have for that kind of research, for human performance, human health research, decompression physiology research, we can kind of dig in even more as to what's happening in the body and make that hopefully safer, and work with, we're not looking to do this just on our own. This is all in collaboration, obviously, with folks from the Navy, for example, or maybe commercial diving programs. And then, so that's kind of one piece. And then also human performance. So that's human health and performance is kind of the one area. And performance, just thinking about how do we optimize nutrition for individuals when they're living under sea? How do we optimize their sleep? What does exercise look like for them? Are there other things that we can be doing? This is kind of my area, my past area of research are the things that they can be taking, like supplements, for example, to protect the brain in that extreme environment. So
that's quite interesting.
So that's kind of an area. There's definitely like a big area of our research that we're building out. And then moving into kind of the human habitat technology area, that's the second silo. So how, the life support systems, CO2 scrubbing, being able to kind of, amplify that technology. Oxygen generation is another conversation we're having. Just keeping the habitat clean, being able to try to make sure that you don't have bacterial growth in the habitat, and what that looks like, and monitoring that. And then also there's some really interesting stuff. If you've heard about smart home systems, where you have devices in the house that track an individual's health from afar. This would be a perfect place to do testing of those devices, right? It's an enclosed environment. We know that there are changes that happen in saturation diving. So are those devices adequately capturing those changes?
Are we talking AI?
AI tends to be somewhat involved in this because you're collecting a lot of data remotely, and then integrating that into kind of a signal of health for individuals. So
So a question then. So with that in mind, and thinking about diver fitness, how would somebody keep fit underwater at 100 meters in one of the habitats? Because could you like say have a running machine or something like that, where, because they have them in space, don't they?
Yeah, so it would be a smaller exercise device like that would allow for cardiovascular work, and then also strength conditioning. And they've developed out a lot. I think that's another really big shared space for us with space, the space community. Is they've worked really hard to develop out, because obviously exercise is so critically important for so many different things, and also just for mental health too. So it's definitely been requested by folks in our team. They're like, please make sure you have some exercise equipment inside the habitat.
But you're right about mental health as well, because if people are in these enclosed environments, you've got to think of their head as well as their physical being.
Yeah, absolutely. I just was visiting a lab at University of California, Davis, and one of the grad students was developing and this is for space flight, was developing a exercise bike that you also do your laundry while you're riding it. So like you're churning the laundry on the exercise bike. I was like, we could use one of those actually, because laundry is going to be really
it's
important.
It's a matter of gears, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to be gears.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. But yeah, that's going to be super important. And again, that goes back into that performance piece, right? Like keeping people healthy mentally and physically.
Because we've spoken to saturation divers as well, and realizing that they're stuck in, their environment is a lot smaller probably than the habitat is going to be, but mentally they're away from their family, and they're generally,
you're not going to want to see everybody's smalls all going round, are you? Dry.
No. Well, so one of the things that we tested out during the NEMA mission was it's called Miniature Exercise Device 2, so it's Med 2. And it allowed you, it's like rowing, is like a rowing machine / there's some strength stuff, but it also was connected to an iPad that allowed you, or a version of an iPad, I don't know if it's iPad specifically, but it allowed you to work out virtually with a partner back on Earth.
No, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, so you could go work out with your, spouse or your best friend or your kid or whatever that looks like, right? And have that interaction. So you could race them. It could just be like a side-by-side kind of run. But again, a mental health, piece kind of tied into the physical health side of things. And so we were testing that out before they flew that up to space station as well. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And what about gender kind of analysis? Because when we've spoken to saturation divers, it's pretty much male dominated. There's very few women saturation divers, so presumably this is going to be very different. Looking at the future, it's going to be more of an equal mix.
But it's going to be high end, isn't it?
So I mean, everybody will have to pass a physical, for sure. But beyond that, yes, we will look at kind of expanding. So obviously female, but then also expanding that age range. So that's been pretty typical for the commercial military diving side of things. That's definitely an area of research that we want to dig into.
But looking at the mix up of the actual units, they're going to be all really nicely done, nice quarters for people to stay in, for the researchers to actually stay in, where it's not going to be as much like saturation divers, where they're just basically in a tube for the whole time. These are all going to be nicely done, windows to the water, everything. It's going to be a nice place to be.
Yeah, it will be really nice. I mean, just even for comparison, and this is not a complaint. I love being in Aquarius Reef Base. I did not want to leave. So, but we slept in bunks, right? It was like we had 3 bunks on either side, and we slept, pretty close quarters. And we had a number of folks that snored, for example, and you're not getting away from that in the habitat. So I laugh, and Kirk likes to use this in his presentations. I had to listen to heavy metal to fall asleep to drown out
clips
to drown out the snoring. I don't know. I think it was mouth based, but anyway. But yeah, and then just having that privacy, so you can do a phone call, with your partner or your kids. I know at Aquarius Reef Base, one of our crew members would go outside and read to their kids, at night, but they have to go out to the wet porch to do that. So being able to do that from the comfort of your stateroom would be really incredible. And then just thinking about too, on the research side of things, it opens up more research possibilities, because you can, have devices in those rooms for monitoring, whatever that looks like. So going back to that, like just that human habitat interaction integration, human machine teaming is like a really big thing that there's a lot of interest in. And again, on the spaceflight side of things too. And then how our divers interact with potential robots in the water. That's going to be a big space that we're building out. And then as far as research goes, and then also diver physiological monitoring. So as they're out in the water, what kind of data can we capture from them for safety reasons, but then also for, for future research. And just FYI, that last silo of research is going to be the marine science, right? So that's, once we get the habitats in the water and we have the researchers in the water, now we're thinking about the marine science that can be conducted from the habitat. And even things like coral restoration, that's going to be a really big area that we want to dig into. So
yeah. Wow, they're 3 big areas.
yeah. And a lot of excited potential collaborators. So, we've got a huge list of folks that we're now working on potential partnerships with, and looking at funding opportunities, and also looking at, collaborative research opportunities and starting those up. So we're super excited.
So in terms of the site is based in the UK, but are you kind of roving around the world seeking these partnerships and talking to people?
Yeah, we're open. So we definitely consider ourselves to be a global entity. So have not made it to a large part of the world yet, but just in the last 2.5 months, it's largely been US based and then UK based as far as conversations, a little bit in Europe as well. But we're definitely we're going to expand on that for sure as we build things out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exciting stuff.
It's
Yeah.
exciting
Thanks.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, from our visit, we're just thinking, wow, and you can just see the potential and for the good of exploration for, our planet as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about the possibilities. Sorry, go ahead.
It would be interesting to see what else comes from it, because it's when things like, like NASA, when they started going into space, all these other spin-off things come from it,
Yeah.
bacon foil, Velcro, all this stuff. And it'd be interesting to see what when new partners come in and, ideas and, it'd be interesting to see how it all develops over time. And it's been fascinating to see it from, quite early on. And we'll be, certainly a company, and we tell people, if you're not following, to make sure you're following Deep, and be on their website, get on their newsletter.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we're all over social media too, on Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, that's awesome and thank you for supporting us along the way and promoting us in that context. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because right now, I think if you think about the impact that some of the commercial space companies have had and what that interaction looks like, that partnership looks like from the commercial side to, working with NASA and ESA and JAXA, for example, it's just really amplified what they're capable of doing. And so we see Deep doing the same thing from, with respect to potential undersea partners in that space. So that public-private partnership is really critical. It's really important, but we really see Deep as kind of playing a role in really amplifying that relationship and building things out. And maybe it's interesting because going back, some of the conversations we've had with certain sponsors and folks and different, funding agencies and different research labs, they're like, we've been waiting for an organization to come along to do this because we know that building undersea habitats is hard and it takes time and it takes money. And so having somebody who's willing to put those things forth and bring in the right folks, you've met our team, just such an amazing breadth of experience and knowledge. They're really excited to see somebody investing in this space and hopefully, everybody being able to kind of play off of that initial investment and work together to really change things with respect to undersea exploration and research.
Well, that's the main thing, isn't it? Because, at the end, that's right, talking about these things, but then talking and then following that up with hard cash, and that's a whole different, thing, isn't it? And it's good that you're getting that back in, and other people are seeing that potential. It's brilliant, so that's good. Gemma, is there anything else you wanted to ask? I was just thinking, but we should go on to the questions.
Yeah, no, well, obviously, people, if they haven't heard of Deep, just obviously look at Instagram and the website, and they'll probably be blown away about just how much is there. But it's just take small snippets from it and then just realize the potential. But it's certainly exciting, and we're really enjoying following the journey. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. You guys have been tremendous advocates for us, and look forward to future conversations with you guys as we continue to progress with everything with Deep.
Yes,
so thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, you are a very confident how you come across and in everything that you do. So, what challenges you and gets you out of your comfort zone?
Oh boy, a lot, to be honest.
You said you're fine in small spaces.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm actually super comfortable in small spaces. Like I cocoon at night. Like I pull all the sheets over my head and go into a cocoon. Crowds of people, because crowds of people, it may be a tight space, but it's not predictable. So I think, just human behavior in itself was probably like a bigger thing, but I think just, crowds of people, and I'm fine, I can handle it, but I definitely, it's not my happy space. So yeah. But as far as like things that challenge me, honestly, my biggest challenge, I was just having a conversation with Phil Short about this, who you guys have interviewed. So I think, so it's balance. It's finding balance, right? So
Balance in life,
especially
you mean?
balance in life.
Yeah.
That was my 2024 New Year's goal, was balance. So I think there's a thing going around social media saying, put a word that's going to define what your goal is. And I said, my goal for this year is balance. And I love all the jobs I've had, but in particular Deep. I love what I do so much. It's very easy to do it, like all the time, around the clock. But I also am very aware that I'm a better person for it. I'm a better employee. I'm a better researcher. I'm a better partner. If I, family member, all the things, if I do, divvy up that time and make time for self, make time for family, all the things that are important.
Very
Make time
true.
for exercise, mental health, all those things. So,
yeah.
I just going to say that Phil told us something when we spoke to him, and Phil spoke to us and come on the podcast like in our first year, really early on. And one of the things that Phil told us that has stuck with us all the way through is that he said, "Find the magic in every dive."
I love that.
And that's so true.
Yeah. I love that. And I assure you, with all the thousands, I can't even imagine how many, probably 10,000s of dives that he has under his belt now. I know he still does that. So that's amazing.
Yeah. No, he's definitely an inspiration.
Yeah.
So with diving, if you could take 3 people into the underwater world, they don't have to be divers. It's just the principle of taking people into that environment. Which 3 people would you choose and why?
So I'm going to say this from my first answer is from a U.S. perspective, but I would say whoever is president. I think having somebody, one of the drivers with Deep is that, getting eyes underwater and getting people to see what's happening underwater. Because once you see that, you understand, you just have a better comprehension of what's happening and what we're trying to protect, right? So I think somebody in the policy, not to say that there aren't other people in the policy making space, but I think having somebody like from leadership, so in the U.S. side of things, it'd be whoever's president taking them subsea. It's not a romantic answer. It's more of a functional answer.
Yes,
My mom. So my mom listens to all my stories. She's not a diver. I don't think she's ever been snorkeling. Like, that's just not her thing. But I think it'd be really cool to safely take her, make her feel comfortable, and take her underwater so she can see, why it is I do what I do. But also, I think she would just fall in love with it, and just be a really cool experience for her. And the last one, I'm just trying to think. That's a toughie. Trying to think if I have any. Well, actually, it's going to be another personal one, but my partner. But he's going to get certified. So Doug, Doug is an amazing human, but I think, and he's really comfortable in the water, but he's never been undersea, so he's going to get certified hopefully this summer,
brilliant.
actually.
That's so great, and something that you can share as well.
Yeah. It's just funny. I was thinking about like my mentors and my heroes, and I think they're all divers. So I mean, they've all been underwater already. So kind of thinking about non-divers in that context. So
and again, it's about capturing that inspiration and making it contagious, because then it's passed on and word of mouth, and people think, oh, I want to do that, I want to try it. And
I was gonna say, I would love to take like all of U.S. Congress under. That would be fantastic. It'd be a disaster, but I would love to do that, because I think just having those policymakers, having them see what's under there. I will say the biggest advocates that we have on the policy side of things are people who are divers. So individuals who are divers, and they get it, and they are fully behind, the different initiatives that are out there to protect our oceans and for, whatever kind of research is happening in those spaces. So I think, I mean, that's a lot of people, but I mean, collectively, that would be a great group. There's a big push from my side of, it's great to collect data, but really making sure that data and that science is going somewhere and driving change. So,
well, they've got to understand it, haven't they? That's right, giving them the facts and the figures, but they got to understand it, why it matters. You know, and it's not easy with some of them. Okay. Next question. I'm going to change it slightly, mate. And for this podcast, we are going to just make it a little bit different. So we normally give our guests a billboard to put a statement, a video, an image. Okay. But for the argument of this podcast, let's say it will also go on the side of the Sentinel that everyone's going to see. Okay. What either image, video, statement, whatever you like, it's going to go to the world. They're all going to see it. Okay. What are you going to put on your billboard and
Oh
why?
boy. And you said Phil, I'm not going to steal Phil's, but you said Phil's was make every dive, find magic in every dive. That was Phil's. So yeah, that sounds like Phil. Okay. This is going to sound really cheesy, but I think do great things. So whether that's you as a human on a day-to-day basis, interacting with your family and just being a good human, or if it's trying to do something that's bigger than yourself and or bigger than your community even. So I think just do great things. It's really simple, but
do great things.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, because all these little things, make, it's all karma, isn't it? And they sort of combine and make you feel better and hopefully make other people feel better too.
Yeah, and great doesn't have to be some massive, project or whatever. It can be just helping your neighbor out. It can be, helping somebody cross the street. It can be adopting,
opening
a rescue animal,
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, very good.
Do great things.
Yeah. And, applicable to anyone, anywhere as well.
Yeah.
No, it's been a great conversation with you. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah. So we're really excited about following your journey at Deep and following the journey of Deep as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again for the opportunity to interview with you, but also just for being such great advocates and supporters of what we're doing. So I look forward to we're gonna have some really fun updates over the next year. So I'm sure to provide for you guys on a future podcast.
Look forward to it.
Yes, yeah, and hopefully, maybe we'll get to meet you face to face at some point when you're in the UK.
We did bump into Kirk, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Kirk was there when you guys did the tour.
Yes, yeah, he was. We just quickly had a few words and then whisked off with Phil, to carry on our tour. But it was really, really good to, see the amazing people that work at Deep as well and their enthusiasm and love for what they do. And, that goes a long way when you've got a role and a job that, you love going to.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys have the same thing going. So you guys get it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been lovely to meet you and chat to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So that was Dawn Kernagis. What say? Thanks for coming on. I so hope I've got your surname right. I'm sure I have. But thanks for coming on, and that was really good. And we hope our listener out there enjoyed it too, as much as us. So.
It's
lots
great
of
her
stuff.
enthusiasm as well for the role that she's done and the roles that she has been in as well. And there's a huge future in Deep for her.
Well, it's exciting times, isn't it? As I said earlier, what I quite like about it is that you've got this whole merge of science, which is going on for underwater, which is also science for exploration into space. And they're kind of merging and all these people are sort of like putting their heads together going, because the spin-offs of that, that won't affect everyday man as such. We can't all go to space. We can't all go down, to do underwater exploration.
There will be
spin-offs.
Yeah.
Some of this technology will filter out in a smaller way into the diving world, into the medical world, into fitness and sports science.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's a huge area. It sounds quite daunting, but it isn't when you break it down into.
It's daunting in the way is that there's no limit, and daunting in the way of they've got responsibility.
Yes,
as well,
that's good. They've got no limits either, because if you have limits. No, you've got to. It's the whole thing of exploration, and you've got to have no limits for exploration. And
look at it from a cave diving point of view. If you had limits as such, would you not want to see what's around that corner? If
Yeah,
you're in a cave, you'd think, hold on a minute, where's that? Well,
that's not it's
there's
not
another
human
bit of a
nature.
cave there. We've not been down there. You
No,
know, you
no.
might have limits in depth, maybe, but in that particular dive,
Mm.
before someone says, well, you have limits. Yes, of course you have limits, but
Yeah, but no,
well,
it was really, really interesting and great to catch up with her finally as well. So
yeah, it is. It's like you want to learn more. So then you kind of can delve deeper. But there's so much of it unwritten, and obviously it's still early days at Deep where they're kind of now attracting certain partners and
yeah, yeah.
businesses.
But also inspiring the younger generation. They're getting involved in high
Has
schools
to.
and universities, and that is our future. And to
Well, it
think how
has to,
amazing.
doesn't it?
Yeah, but think how amazing if you're a parent and you've got, your children are going to be like, wow, look at this. And, like Dawn, she knew what she wanted to do from a very early age because she was just kind of.
Well, these people like Dawn, the Phils, Kirk, all these people who have now come into the business, they're kind of trailblazers because when you look at it and in a time frame, we go to work, don't we? Let's say if you're in your mid 30s, well, most people will probably be retired by the time they're 60. That gives you a window of 30 years, right? Well, you don't go into something like Deep thinking that's only going to be 30-year program. That's going to
Right.
be 50, 100 years. So the only way you can prolong and keep that going is by attracting the the youth of today,
Yeah, yeah.
and getting the school kids involved and lighting those fires because they're going to be the future people, you know, doing the future exploration, whether it's
Yeah.
in the sea or space.
Yeah, and I think it's just changing people's perception. It's a bit like space, isn't it? Space travel is always evolving. It's never going to end. We've got to space, but then we're going to push the frontiers and go to Mars and whatever. But
And
it's the same underwater as well.
young people who haven't been followed certain experiences or training, they'll come into it with fresh eyes, new ideas, and you'll get that. And it's exciting. It's very
Yeah,
exciting.
I guess it's a bit like people that were there when we first went to the moon, and they experienced that whole journey and that happening. But it is a bit like what's happening now, where we're going to sort of.
Did I ever tell you the story about when Kennedy um, uh, went round the workshop over there, and he interviewed. He didn't interview. He spoke to somebody. A guy was cleaning the floor with a broom. He was sweeping and President Kennedy said to him, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm helping to put man on the moon, sir."
Yeah, everybody's got a role, plays part. Doesn't
It's
matter how
pretty
big.
cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah, no, it's very true. So yeah, so we'll follow the progress. So if you want to check out Deep, head to the website. That's the first port of call.
Deep.com.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then they've got an Instagram page as well. We'll put the links in the show notes.
Well, Instagram.
Twitter.
I don't think they're on Facebook.
No,
Might be wrong.
Twitter. I think they're on as well.
And LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah. So there's lots to learn and lots to find out and read about the people that are involved in Deep.
Yeah.
And obviously we've spoken to Phil Short quite recently. Check out our YouTube videos on our visit to Deep, and they're
Yeah.
broken down. There's a playlist, so we'll pop the.
And Barry McGowan is the man of the moment out of all of them.
He's
Like
popular.
He's like Deep superstar, isn't he?
Yeah,
Really?
Barry he's a submarine pilot. So he gave us a really interesting conversation about his role as a pilot and what he'd been up to. And then he gave us a tour of one of the Triton 3 subs. So
Yeah, it was awesome, wasn't it?
yeah.
And that was a really good time. That was enjoyed that.
Yeah. So that was Deep and Dawn.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. Don't forget our lovely sponsors who sponsor these episodes time and time again. So make sure you go to narc.90.com. They are beyond technical. And right now there is an offer on that if you tell them that you listen to the podcast, and we have a code called Big Scuba 2024.
Yep.
They can say you might save some money. So make sure you do that. But anything in the diving world that you want, particularly if it's technical diving, you're looking for a new dive computer, or I don't know, you want to check out something with rebreathers,
or if you've got, or you're a bit stumped on, you need some advice about dive computers or your rebreather, or you need it to be serviced, then they're the people to definitely go to.
They certainly are. So give them a call or an email or message. Go to the website. All their details are on there.
Yeah. So yeah. So I think that was the Big Scuba podcast.
That certainly was. Well, thanks for listening. We'll speak to you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for downloading.
Now that does wrap up today's episode of the Big Scuba podcast. But if you want to hear more from the podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button depending on what platform you are listening on. That way you will never miss an episode from us. But if you are listening on Apple Podcasts and did enjoy what you heard today, we would really appreciate it if you head to the show page to leave a 5-star rating and review. It really does help us. If you do, please take a screenshot of that review and send it to us on Instagram, and we'll give you a shout out to say a big thank you. If you have any questions for us or anything that has been mentioned in today's episode, be sure to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms or send us an email. The links are in the show notes. We will get back to you no matter what. If you have made it to this point in the episode, we both want to say a big thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.